And so, in the last year, I've learned like how important discipline is in order to push through some of the obstacles.
Welcome to the Waves Business Coaching Podcast, where you can learn how to grow as a leader, inspire your team, and optimize the operations in your organization. I'm your host, Jacob Carnes, and this week on the podcast, I interview Nick Pulgine, who is a Chick-fil-A owner-operator in Wrigleyville, just north of Chicago. And we talk about Nick's story of resilience and perseverance and his journey to become a Chick-fil-A owner-operator. It's a great story, and I can't wait for you to hear it in just a few seconds. If you want to learn how you can bring the best out of your team, be sure to go to wavesbusinesscoaching.com, which is linked in the episode description. We'd love to equip you and your team with the tools and resources to optimize your business and give you peace of mind as a leader. Let's dive into my conversation with Nick Pulgine. Nick, thanks so much for being on the podcast. I'd love for you to share your story and how you became a Chick-fil-A owner-operator.
Yeah, man. Well, first, thank you so much for having me. Truly a pleasure to be here.
Very on brand.
Yeah, right. Yeah, man. So my story, becoming a Chick-fil-A operator, really is kind of a story of perseverance, more or less. And if people, like listeners, are familiar with the franchisee selection process at Chick-fil-A, they know it's very intimate, it's very intensive, it's very comprehensive. So I started with Chick-fil-A way back in 2016, just as a team member at Chick-fil-A Fox Valley Center, so just outside of the city of Chicago. And, having grown up in the hospitality industry, my family, big Italian family, very food centric, right? Yeah. I knew I wanted to pursue owning a restaurant specifically, but I didn't really know how that was going to work out until I got introduced to Chick-fil-A. And so my operator, Mark Cabrera, really kind of like paved the way for like, hey, this is what Chick-fil-A is, this is how we do things, and this is what it looks like to become an operator. So I served with him for about 3 years in a variety of capacities. And, Chick-fil-A has, for those who don't know, a pretty prescribed track for restaurant talent wanting to pursue a further career with Chick-fil-A. And for most people pursuing operator, that's the leadership development program. And so that's what my eyes were set on. It was, hey, let's do this thing at the restaurant for a few years, and then we'll get into LDP. Yeah. And that's how I become an operator. So after, just over 2 years, I started the interview process for LDP. And there had a couple setbacks. So I know you've interacted with Morgan. You've had Morgan Crabtree on the podcast.
That's right. She's been on.
Morgan is awesome, but Morgan was one of my interviewers who gave me the opportunity to continue developing before moving on through the process.
And she probably worded it exactly like
yeah, right. So decided, started this process, was told, hey, you know what, you just need a little bit more time. You got to grow in some areas.
Yeah.
So took that feedback for what it was worth and said, okay, if I really want this, I'm going to keep going. So then worked my way through that process, got to the end, the final interview, and I got told no again. And so just context for those listening, like the restaurant can have the tendency to like take all of you, especially if you have an unbalanced relationship with your work, which I did. Yep. And so I was kind of at this season like, man, I feel like I've given everything to all of me to this. Yep. And it's still not working out. I don't know what I'm going to do. And so from there, my operator and I started exploring other opportunities. At this time, the talent development program, I guess then training development program, wasn't a well-known thing. It kind of had a little bit of a stigma to it. And my operator asked me like, hey, why don't you try pursuing that? And I was immediately like, absolutely not. That's the program for people who aren't good enough to get into LDP. Yeah. Like, plus I don't want to be on staff at Chick-fil-A.
Right.
But he was like, hey, just like call my friend, Brittany Roberts, talk to her, hear what she's about, and go from there. And so had this moment of, okay, I need to swallow my pride and actually like look at the options on the table. Because right now, the only option is to leave Chick-fil-A if I don't continue to pursue this. So ended up talking with Brittany, and Brittany was just like super cool, super straightforward, very honest about like, hey, this is how I think I can help you. Sort of take it or leave it. And I was like, I think I'm going to leave it. So,
thanks, but no thanks.
Yeah. So, took some time to kind of, again, step back, started looking outside of Chick-fil-A.
Yeah.
And then ironically was approached with the opportunity to pursue operator directly for a super low volume mall in Indiana. I was told, like, you're not going to make any money being the operator of this restaurant. We just need you to sit on it until we can terminate the deal and close the mall. And so I was like, okay, they want me to do that. I guess I'll go for that.
Right.
And so I have these like two very interesting propositions on my plate of like, skip the whole development thing and just go for operator, which felt like a huge, like, this is probably not going to happen. And then this TDP thing that I was like, okay, maybe this is worth thinking about, even though I don't know what's on the other side of it.
Right.
And so I decided to pursue both and just kind of said, hey,
which one's going to work out?
Let's see what works out.
Yeah.
So in 2019, got through about half of the franchisee selection process, and then my candidacy was terminated. So I was told no again. And that was really key in my story with Chick-fil-A and kind of like set the tone, I guess, for my future development. Because it was like the dream was shattered. You know what I mean? I had been chasing operator. It wasn't like a development program to get to operator. It was the thing. And I got told no. And I felt like, what am I going to do? You know, like this is what I wanted, and now it's gone. And so it really, now that I look back on it, was truly the best thing that could have happened, because it allowed me then, as I was pursuing TDP simultaneously, to step into those interviews much more authentically and much more like, what are you going to do? Tell me no? Kind of just like approach the process honestly and authentically. And so in October of 2019, I was accepted into the talent development program, training development program at the time, and moved down to Atlanta and started at the Sports Center. As you know, trained a lot of people.
That's right.
Did a lot of training in that season of my life. I think, again, I look back on those 3 years in Atlanta, and it was truly the best thing, like just the best season of life in that I got to grow in who I am, just like as a professional, as a young man. I got to understand the brand that I wanted to be a business partner with eventually on a much different and more intimate level. I found my wife, so that was cool.
That's a huge win.
Yes. And then kind of, again, through these projects, and I attribute a lot of this to people like Brittany Roberts, who said, okay, you want to be an operator. We don't really know what that's going to look like, but let's make it happen. Yeah. And so in my time in TDP, along with the training, as you know, I spent a lot of time in field-facing work. So I helped close the Hateful Dwarf house when they decided to tear it down and build the new one. And so that gave me a lot of face time with
the right people.
The right people. Yeah, right. And then spawned out of that was this opportunity to, ironically, kind of do this hybrid participant thing with the leadership development program. So all of a sudden, 3.5 years later, I find myself back in the seat of LDP, right?
That's right.
And I got to spend 10 months on the road as a grand opening supervisor. And so all of these things were just kind of like in motion, and I didn't know where it was leading, but I just knew, hey, this is the next right step. Like, this is the next step in front of me. I'm going to take it. So all of that to say, it was in 2021 that I was looking at our real estate map, and I saw that there was an active deal for Chick-fil-A Wrigleyville on the north side of Chicago. And I just was like, man, that's my restaurant. That's it.
That's the dream.
That's it. That's my restaurant. Mind you, timing was way off. It wasn't going to make sense. But I just was like, that's it. And I want to go for it. So started the application process for the franchisee selection process again. I'm in 2021 and just kind of like faithfully walked through that process. And again, from what I had learned from being told no all those times, I was able to approach this time around much more authentically, much more like, hey, you know what? You guys have told me no before. And it ended up being the best thing for me. And so, do I want this? Yes, I want it more than anything. Will it hurt really bad if I get told no? Yes. But also, what I've learned is I'll be fine.
Yeah.
So, all of that to say, move through the franchisee selection process at a relatively quick pace. Truly, the stars kind of aligned. I think it helps that there weren't a ton of people in line for this restaurant, but moved through the franchisee selection process pretty quickly and was selected in June of 2022. And I opened the doors to Chick-fil-A Wrigleyville on April 6th of 2023. So we are just shy of 1 year.
Almost there. Dude, 1 year. That's crazy. It's been that long. Your story is inspiring for a lot of reasons, but getting told no a lot, obviously, and the perseverance of getting through that, I think a lot of people can empathize with, of like getting told no and having to keep going, or maybe getting told no and being like, you know what, I'm done. I'm not going to try anymore. Like, let's give up. I think knowing that about you, and then, you know, I got to see you get selected. And I mean, when you got selected, when they told you your final, like, yes, you're becoming an operator, a lot of emotion, right? Like a lot of emotion. Like at that point, did it hit you at that point? Like all these no's finally led to this? Like what was behind that emotion?
Yeah, it was, man, I look back on that day and it's like the feeling from that moment just like carried for like a week. I remember like I didn't sleep that entire night that I got I got selected. I just was like on cloud nine. Yeah, I remember sitting in Truett Cathy's office, like sitting in the chair where they interview you, and David Zamora, my franchisee selection lead, saying, "Hey, my last question for you is, will you be the operator of Chick-fil-A Wrigleyville?" And it was like I distinctly remember this like it felt like almost like a dam breaking, like this but like literally burst. Like I think I like immediately started ugly crying, but it was this like, oh my gosh, I did it. Like there has been so much like I have no idea if this is going to work out, or hey, this is not going to work out. The chances of getting this are literally next to none, or slim to none. And so all of that emotion was like, yeah, I finally did it. I finally achieved this goal, and it's real. You know, I spent years imagining ringing the bell, imagining cutting the ribbon, you know, at my grand opening, or leading a team. And it was this like very distinct moment, like one question that made it real. And so it was really cool to just be there and have all of my family, my wife, obviously, all my friends, my coworkers, like see all of that come to fruition.
Yeah. That's really cool. So obviously, like I said, something people can emphasize with is getting told no. But one thing I think is unique about your story, and you might not feel this way throughout the entire time, but as you look at the entire journey at this point, you stayed motivated enough to keep trying after getting told no. I counted at least 4 different times in your story getting big no's. How did you stay motivated during tough times? As you know, it felt like doors were closing and you're like, nope, I'm betting on myself. Like I'm going to keep going. How did you stay motivated through that time?
I think back to a couple of the no's, and like I'd be lying if I told you that I was intrinsically motivated at some of those points to keep going.
Yeah.
I think a big part of my success in getting to this thing, operator, was I had a lot of people who cared about me enough to be really good truth tellers. And sometimes that was to encourage, and that was to sympathize, and that was to um, coddle when I needed it the day I got told no. But in a lot of ways, a lot of times it was people telling me like, okay, suck it up. Like, you've got told no, like pick it up and keep
Right.
moving. Um, and I think that's when I look at people in hard situations that seem to be stuck and can't really just like break through. I do think it's a lot of like the community and the people you have around you. Um, you know, my family, my mom and my dad have an immense amount of grit, just like this incredible innate grit in them that's like, hey, we're going to make something happen and we're going to keep moving, just in their stories. And I think that was instilled in my siblings and I. And so when I got told no, my parents were like, okay, yeah, you can feel this, you can be disappointed, but then you got to figure it out. You got to keep moving uh, because that's your only option. And so, you know, and then I had really great business leaders, like my operator, Mark, who, you know, was mostly like, all right, get it together. Pick
Pick yourself up.
Yep. But really offered me the opportunity to just grow, oftentimes at the expense of his own business. And I think, again, like all of those things, plus I loved it and I'm competitive. Um, Having been a swimmer for 15 years, I swam all the way through college. Like, all I know is like, I'm gonna get this goal, or I'm gonna win. I'm gonna do
win.
everything I can to win.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how it was. I was like, I'm not giving up on this until literally the door gets slammed entirely in my face. Like, Chick-fil-A was going to need to tell me, you will never have an opportunity with us ever, before I gave up on it.
They're going to have to forcibly remove me from this property.
I was like, we're going to figure this out. So I think that's a lot of where that motivation came from.
So I found a quote recently that I really like from John F. Kennedy, and he said, "Things do not happen; things are made to happen." Again, as I hear your story, I mean, can you share how you made some of those things happen? Because a couple of times, I know you made some things happen that kind of you just shared as a part of your story and kind of glossed over. How did you make some stuff happen that wasn't necessarily there whenever you started? And I hope I've prompted you to share a certain story. If not, I'll just ask for it. But how did you make some stuff happen along the way?
Yeah. So, I briefly alluded to like the timing of Wrigleyville and being selected as the operator of Chick-fil-A Wrigleyville. You know, so for those listening who don't know, there is within the world of Chick-fil-A, both like on staff and operator, we talk a lot about timing and opportunity. And so there was this opportunity for Chick-fil-A Wrigleyville, but the timing was way off, right? I hadn't even started the franchisee selection process. And the process, on average, takes 18 to 24 months. So they're moving on this restaurant. I haven't even applied. I've got to get through like 10 interviews before we're even talking about a restaurant. But I had this like I said earlier, like I was like, that's my restaurant. Like I know, like deep in me that like I'm the right operator. I'm the right person to operate that restaurant. And so before I even started the interview process, I built a business plan. You know, I thought to myself, even if I don't get it, or it's not even a conversation, it at least gives me somewhere to start. So I built this business plan and put a lot of like passion into it. I spent a ton of time on it. And from there, I basically shoved it down anybody's throat who would like give me FaceTime. So I think back to a conversation I had with Amy Odie, who's the executive director of launch support at Chick-fil-A. She and I were talking, and she was like, "Hey, how are things going? You know, how's the selection process?" And I was like, "Oh, you know, I'm still like at the beginning, you know." The Wrigleyville's on there, but I don't think the timing's right. And she was like, no. absolutely not. Like, you go make that happen. Like, if you want to
Yeah.
be an operator, we got to know that you got to make things happen. And I was like, oh, okay, sure. um,
Yeah.
and so she just encouraged me in that conversation to like put myself out there and have conversations. And so I went out of my way to meet with people like Lamar Leverett and Derek Harvey and David Zamora, like the people who were selecting for this
Yep.
restaurant, just to have coffee and just to have the opportunity to say, hey, here's who I am. Like, want
Yep.
to get to know you. I want you guys to get to know me.
Yep.
And then I, strategically was like, also, here's this thing. Here's this plan I put together. If you've got some time on the plane when you're flying to your next
That's right.
operator visit, just like
Let's
take
check
a
it
look
out.
at it.
Yep.
But it was those conversations where, really as a candidate, like those are make or break conversations. If I
100%.
screw up a coffee, I could ruin my whole candidacy, right?
That's right.
And so there was a lot of anxiety behind that, but I just knew, like, okay, if I want this, I sort of got to shoot for the moon.
Yeah.
And so I was able to kind of swoop in at the 11th hour and give myself a chance. I remember distinctly in my screening interview at the very end, and they're like, hey, do you have any questions? Like, what questions do you have for us? I just said, putting it out there, will Wrigleyville even like still be on the table by the time I get to just talking about restaurants, like
Right.
specific opportunities? And the guy I was interviewing with, like, flat, zero emotion, like the most stone face I've ever seen, goes, no. And then, like, that was the end of the interview. So it was really funny, afterward, moved through the process, had my next interview.
Yeah.
Usually they say, okay, we'll call you in 8 weeks. They called me 2 days later and said, hey, you're interested in Wrigleyville, right? Yeah. Okay, awesome. You have another interview in 2 weeks. And so really moved through kind of fast and furious at the end. But I do attribute a lot of that to just like making connections that I needed to make.
Yep.
Because I did firmly believe I was the right fit for this opportunity.
Made it happen. And I love that because it's like you're never, hardly ever just going to be handed something. And even from the outside, I think sometimes it might look like, hey, this person got handed something, but you didn't see the 16 things they did that led to them getting handed something there at the very, very end, which is inspiring about your story. So you're in a role now as an owner-operator, and you've reached the mountaintop, you reached this goal, but now that you're there, it's like there's a new mountain to climb, which is now you're a business owner, and that has a whole new set of challenges. How important is it that you've established this pattern of resilience to get to where you are now? Like, how do you utilize that in your role now as a business owner?
I've been thinking about this a lot, and also about just like the practice of discipline. I think resilience, discipline, motivation, I think they're all very closely related or tied together. But as a business owner, what I've learned is like I have to make this work, not because I'm competitive or not because I really, really want to. Like, I have to, or I'm not in business.
Right.
Like there's like literally no.
That's right.
It's like it's sort of like the idea of like do or do not. There's no try. Like, we just have to do it. And so, in the last year, I've learned like how important discipline is in order to push through some of the obstacles. So like I have an urban restaurant that comes with its own set of challenges from an employment standpoint and a cost standpoint and regulations, all these things. It's hard to source good talent. My guests tend to be pretty rowdy in Wrigleyville. Like there's all of these challenges. But my only option is like make it work. Yeah. And so I really look back at the vision for my business, and I try and really lead through that with my directors and my team leaders. And so the vision for Chick-fil-A Wrigleyville is to be a home away from home for our community by tenaciously pursuing excellence in all areas. And we, our 4 values, we do that through demonstrating respect, initiative, influence, and grit.
Mm.
And I think when I look at those 4 core values, the first 3 that I mentioned are kind of like table stakes just to like be with Chick-fil-A, but like grit at the end, like through my story, is just something that I'm so passionate about. Like, Grit by Angela Duckworth is like one of my favorite books. Just the concept of like, keep going. In my vision, I say tenaciously and excellence, right? I say tenaciously pursuing excellence. Again, tying that back to grit. Like, I use the word tenaciously very intentionally to say like, hey, whatever we do, we're not giving up. You're going to run this road until the very end. And the end of the road might not be the outcome you want, right? The end of the road might not, in my case, be a $10 million restaurant where I'm netting 18% every month, right? The end of the road might be like, hey, the cap on this restaurant is 7 million and you might not ever net more than 8%, right? Or 6% or whatever. Like, but I'm going to run it till the end until I know that answer for sure. And I'm going to do it excellently along the way. So I think that's how I've been able to kind of take all of these challenges that have been thrown at me and hopefully inspire my leaders to kind of say, okay, this is what we do. Whatever you do in this business, whether you're just putting food in a bag or you're breading a piece of chicken, or you're writing the schedule or you're ordering truck, like any of those things, okay, we're going to do it excellently, no matter how hard or challenging it is.
I love no matter what's outside of our control, we're going to be excellent. That's inside of our control. Like we're going to pursue this, and that's going to lead to resilience and perseverance and discipline. Is just this pursuit of this high standard of excellence that you talk about. What advice would you give other small business owners like yourself who might be struggling with that resilience, that perseverance, that discipline to push through?
I think when it gets really hard, this sounds kind of cheesy and a little squishy, but like connecting yourself back to your why in whatever it is you do. I think like something that TDP, my time developing within Chick-fil-A, or just like my time with Chick-fil-A altogether, has taught me like there is a higher purpose or a very specific purpose as to why, like the why of what you're doing. And I got to really become connected with that through my time developing. And so in the last year, where it's been super, super challenging, and frankly, like a lot of what's happened with this restaurant in the last year is not what I expected or not what I planned for. But I know why I do what I do, and I'm going to keep going. Again, I'm going to run it until the road comes to an end. So that's one piece, right? Like your why, like be really, really clear on it. And like, it doesn't have to be fluffy language. It doesn't have to be like over the top. It's just like, hey, this is why I do what I do. This is what gets me out of bed. Even when it's not fun. And then I talked about this a little bit earlier, but again, I think community and the people around you are incredibly important. I still have my family as really strong motivators when I'm not feeling motivated. I think I have a little of a leg up being married to Wei Tong, my wife, just because she's like way smarter and just better at everything than me. So, she's an incredible, like, just shoulder to lean on, cry on sometimes, like pick her brain, but she's also really good at saying like, okay, you felt it, kind of what I said earlier, you felt it, now you got to figure it out. Now you got to move on. Or she's really good at saying like, okay, I hear you, but you're a little off on how you're thinking about this. Like maybe think about it differently, because it's not really like, I don't agree with your stance on this. And so again, I think the community around you, it's good to have people who support you and love you and want to love on you. But you need to have people that are going to put you in your place. Especially somebody like me who just like feels a lot of things. I feel way before I start to think. And so those people in my life, my parents, my former operator, my former people leaders in TDP at the support center, like those people who know me well, have seen me develop, have watched me grow. Like those are the people I lean on when I'm like, I don't have the answer. I don't know what to do. So those are the two things. It's kind of long-winded, but those are the two things that I would say are super important.
And I love the community piece because it's also people that trust is so important because they have your best interests at heart. So like they can put you in your place because you know, hey, they're Team Nick. So if they're putting me in my place, I know that they've got my back and that they want me to be successful in this area, which is so important when it comes to community. Rapid fire questions, Nick, to end here. You're in Wrigleyville. You're from Chicago, so I got some Chicago questions for you.
Let's do it.
Obvious one: Cubs or White Sox?
Cubs.
I mean, you're half a block from
from
Wrigley
I can
Field.
see the marquee from my front door. Like
That's
you
right.
got to be Cubs.
Best deep dish in Chicago.
Pequods, no
which
question.
I went to on your recommendation.
It's good.
And I tried the other two big ones too, so can attest that one was the best. Okay, Chicago dog or Italian beef?
I'm an Italian beef guy. Like I love a Chicago dog. Don't get me wrong, but like an Italian beef is a go-to. It's a staple.
Too much on a Chicago dog for me, so I'm with you. Favorite Chicago neighborhood? We'll say that's not Wrigleyville because, come on.
Yeah, come on. I'd say Wicker Park. Wicker Park's a really fun neighborhood.
Where's Wicker Park?
So Wrigleyville is inside of Lakeview, which is a larger neighborhood, right? Wicker Park is kind of southwest, not directly south of Lakeview, but just like southwest. So still on the north side.
Love it. Last one, favorite Chick-fil-A menu item?
Man, if you can make it right, a Chick-fil-A sandwich is very hard to beat.
Love it. The
perfectly.
trainer in you and the standard of excellence never leaves. If you can make it right, being the precursor to the answer, it's got to be made right. That's hard to beat. Nick, thank you so much for being on the podcast. I learned a lot just hearing your story about perseverance, and just really appreciate you sharing.
Of course, man. Thanks for having me. It's been awesome.
Absolutely. See ya.
See ya.
Thank you so much to Nick for being on the podcast. I know that his stories inspired me to be more resilient and to persevere through challenges along my journey. Thank you so much for watching and listening to this episode of the Waves Business Coaching Podcast. For more free tools and resources on how you can grow your organization, be sure to subscribe to the podcast on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. Organizations struggle to grow because they don't know how to bring the best out of their people. At Waves Business Coaching, we inspire teams and optimize operations so that you and your organization can thrive. If you're a business leader and you want to bring the best out of your team, visit our website at wavesbusinesscoaching.com, which is linked in the episode description. If you want a free plan to optimize your business, take my business report, which is also linked in the episode description. In this free assessment, you'll get a diagnosis and plan to optimize your business. This report from Business Made Simple will do in 10 minutes what business consultants take weeks or months to do. Click the link in the episode description to take my business report. Thank you so much for joining us on this episode of the Waves Business Coaching Podcast. Take care.